Tom Telesco is fired. Let's talk about it. Welcome back, everyone. As you already know, Tom Telesco has also been fired. So Antonio Pierce out, Tom Telesco out. Let's go ahead and read the statement real fast. The Las Vegas Raiders have relieved Tom Telesco of his duties as general manager. We appreciate his efforts in helping build a foundation for the future. We wish Tom and his family all the best. So it's official, guys. The Raiders are cleaning house, and I think this sets up for a very big hire. I'll give you my prediction at the very end. What do you guys think? I think in the couple of days since this announcement, I was trying to get this video out sooner, but unfortunately, scheduling, work, the normal 9 to 5 got in the way. So here's my Raiders reaction to it. I think it comes as a relief to a lot of fans. We know Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco didn't get the quarterback that they needed, and that came back to bite them in the butt. And I think that's really why the Raiders are moving on. And we know that there are a bunch of coaching candidates that want to be aligned with their own front office, but I also think this is the Tom Brady effect, as every pundit is speculating, is that Tom Brady wants to be aligned with his own front office and coaching staff. So I think this was an opportunity to clean house, rebuild the organization within, and from the top down, rebuilding this thing. Just to quickly recap of Tom Telesco's season here. He had a great draft. I think the consensus is he had a really good draft. Brock Bowers is an all-pro. Jackson Powers Booth took over the center starting job, and Delmar Glaze took over offensive line at guard, or right tackle, excuse me. So 3 of your picks are instant starters, and you got a bunch of guys that started to contribute in your 4th through 7th rounds. So with all intensive purposes, you had a really good draft. Where they really whiffed is obviously on the quarterback. Gardner Minshew is not good enough. I think every Raider fan knew going into the season with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell wasn't going to be good enough to really compete. You were hoping for the best, but I think in actuality, we all knew that it was not going to be good enough. I really like Aiden O'Connell. I think he can start in this league, but I think next year you still have to come in with a veteran quarterback. You have to trade for a quarterback, or you're probably getting a quarterback via the draft. Mark Davis did say that Tom Telesco would be judged independently of Antonio Pierce. I think, again, this is just about alignment. This is about the organization be aligned with the coach and Tom Brady. And I want to say, I think Tom Telesco is a pretty good evaluator of talent. There's a lot of talent on the Chargers, and I know he gets a lot of shit from Chargers fans about his time there. His issue is not being able to find a head coach. That was his downfall there. But he built that roster. I would say a majority of that roster right now is because of Tom Telesco's drafting. You got the quarterback because of Tom Telesco. You have Khalil Mack in free agency because of Tom Telesco. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Telesco. I doubt he'll ever get a general manager position again or have the opportunity to run an entire franchise. But I definitely think he's going to be an assistant GM, player personnel guy, because he does have an eye for some of the talent on these teams. And it looks like he hit a home run with Brock Bowers. So you're never rooting for a guy to get fired, but you know what? He'll be fine. I'm really not surprised by all of this. I think it only makes sense to have a clean slate. I think there are really 2 ways that the Raiders can go about this. You got path number 1. Path number 1 is identifying your head coach, getting him in the building, and letting him hire his own general manager, something similar to what the 49ers have done with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Just to point out a list of some of the coaches I think the Raiders are probably going to interview. We know about Ben Johnson. Cliff Kingsbury was rumored. We know about Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is definitely a name I think you need to keep an eye on as this thing progresses. I believe Pete Carroll at the time of, it's January 11th for me. So at the time of this recording, I believe Pete Carroll is scheduled to interview sometime next week. And Robert Saleh is also scheduled to interview sometime next week. I think Pete Carroll is definitely a name to keep an eye on because of his history of just building programs and getting everybody on the same page and having coaches part of a succession plan, right? And I think that's what the Raiders to a degree are somewhat looking for, is some stability, culture change. We hear that a lot. In my last video, we talked about it a little bit, is having a head coach that's kind of like that CEO and running the business. So I think that's definitely a name to keep an eye on. But I think there's an alternative path that the Raiders can do here. And the alternative path is going out and identifying that next general manager who can identify talent, build the roster, something that teams like the Eagles, the Ravens, the Steelers, even the 49ers, to name a few, where they have, for the most part, have drafted pretty consistently. That the teams that are perennial playoff teams are often perennial playoff teams and contenders because they drafted well. And I think that's what they're looking for. The Raiders have not drafted well. We look at Brock Bowers on this current draft, and we look at JPJ and what's going on in this current draft. But for the most part, the Raiders haven't really drafted that well. So another big name I think to keep an eye out for is, like I'm saying, the alternative path is finding a general manager, is Howie Roseman. No, I'm just kidding. You're not getting Howie Roseman, but I think you're trying to find that next Howie Roseman in building the roster with talent. I think the Philadelphia Eagles, probably top to bottom, have the best roster, and that's because of drafting. So I think you're looking at, maybe you don't get Ben Johnson because we know he's going to be picky, but what about assistant general manager Ray Agnew? Ray Agnew is going to be pushing to be a general manager, if not with Ben Johnson, then maybe on his own. There's also, I'll even throw in the Washington Commanders assistant general manager, Lance Newmark, a former Lions front office guy and someone who has ties to Ben Johnson. I think that's a person that you may bring in and allow him to hire his own head coach. There's also Ed Dodds, who was interviewed with the Raiders, I believe, twice for the general manager gig. I believe he interviewed when the Raiders ended up going with Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, and then again this past offseason when they went with Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce. So I think that's a name to keep an eye on. There's also a few assistant GMs out there that have New England ties and who have connections to Tom Brady. Again, just looking at teams like the Eagles, the Bills, the Texans, the 49ers, and the Ravens, the Steelers, those are all teams that have drafted really well and for the most part have been competitive. I know Houston is kind of newer to that, but you look at their past few drafts, it's instantly put them into the driver's seat of being a playoff contender. Something that the Raiders desperately need is getting some of your draft picks right. It just seems like year after year your draft is basically a failure within one or two seasons. And we know about the Henry Ruggs stuff. We know about, these tragedies where your draft is just completely destroyed your roster for years to come. So to be a competitive football team, you have to draft well. And that's kind of where I'm getting at. The Raiders just need to become become competitive. I can't tell you really the last time the Raiders have gone to the playoffs 3 years consecutively. It would have to be the Super Bowl years. John Gruden gets the team to the playoffs a couple of times. We know about the Tuck rule, all of that. Raiders trade John Gruden to Tampa Bay. Bill Callahan takes over. They make it to the Super Bowl, and we know what happens there. At that time, I was at the Super Bowl. I was 18 years old. So the last time the Raiders have made the playoffs in consecutive years, I was 18, 17, and 16 years old. I'm turning 40 in a couple of weeks here. So there are Raider fans, football fans, and football players, like active football players, who have never seen the Raiders competitive, never be a perennial playoff team. So for me, this moment, this hire has to be a hire that just gets your team back on track. Like, it's been 20 years since you have been a competitive franchise with any type of consistency. They have to nail this pick. So the Raiders cleaning house and just hitting the Nintendo reset button here really doesn't surprise me, especially when you walked away from Antonio Pierce, who bled silver and black, who loved this franchise, who wanted to be here. So for Mark Davis and Tom Brady to rip that Band-Aid off with guys who wanted to be in the building and loved this culture and wanted to prop this up, you're going to have to replace those guys with front office and a head coach who love the Raiders, but who are committed to getting this franchise back on top. And I really want to defend Mark Davis a little bit. I know there have been a lot of things that have blown up in his face, and I don't think he's a perfect owner. He's made his mistakes. Josh McDaniels was a mistake, but I respect Mark Davis in the sense that he is always going to do what's best for the Raiders. As much as it broke my heart to see the Raiders leave Oakland and move into Las Vegas, I get it. There was no way he was going to get a stadium built here in Oakland with what John Fisher, the Warriors, the A's, and this whole situation where you have 3-4 owners at that site. The Raiders were never going to be able to build on that site, and he took the team to Las Vegas. That broke my heart. I will always feel like the Raiders belong in Oakland, but I live in a world of reality. They're in Las Vegas. I have accepted it. I have moved on. It is what it is. Mark Davis will always do what's best for the Raiders. He got them the stadium. They now have one of the finest stadiums in all the NFL. They have the best training facilities in all of the NFL. They are flush with cash. So I think from a money, stadium, facilities standpoint, they are a dream destination on that front. And like I said, I respect Mark Davis for always trying to put the Raiders in a position to be successful. And I really understand why so many Raider fans are upset with Tom Brady being here. I have been very open with how it bothered me. However, on the flip side, I got to move on, right? I got to move on that the Raiders are in Las Vegas now. I got to move on that Tom Brady is part of the ownership group now. Life moves on, and I have to move on. Tom Brady's here now. He's part of the ownership. And do I honestly think Tom Brady wants the Raiders to just remain mediocre, to remain a franchise that's constantly replacing their GM, constantly replacing coaches, constantly failing at the draft? No. Tom Brady's extremely competitive, and he was part of those New England teams and then the Tampa Bay teams. Tom Brady made a lot of money playing quarterback. Okay, he made a lot of money with endorsements. He made a lot of money over his career. But did he make more money than Robert Kraft? I don't think so. I don't think he did. Tom Brady wants to win. Tom Brady wants to get the Raiders back to winning and competitiveness and hopefully win a Super Bowl, because you know what? He can make a lot of money. His mystique, his influence, his greatness would be amplified from a player to now an owner who put the Raiders back on track would be amplified 50 times over. And he can make a lot of money where he could either buy more shares of the Raiders or have enough money to sell his shares in the Raiders and buy a different franchise. We have seen owners sell their pieces of franchises to buy another one. Something that comes off the top of my head is the Warriors, Golden State Warriors. Joe Lacob was once part owner of the Boston Celtics. He sold his piece, put together a group, and then he ended up buying the Golden State Warriors, and the rest is history. This happens all the time. I know there are a ton of other examples. That's just one that came to the top of my head. Mark Davis essentially hired a consultant in Tom Brady. So I know a lot of Raider fans are, the Patriot way and blah, 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 blah. I think the Patriot way is kind of like, it's not really a thing. I don't think it's really on one person. If it was one person, it's going to be Bill Belichick. So I think it's the Belichick way. I think it's been mislabeled because of the football team, but I really think this whole Patriot way is really the Belichick way. And I don't really think anybody can do the Patriot way. I think McDaniels wanted to, but he's clearly not that guy. And I think Vrabel was somewhat doing it in Tennessee, but it's not really the Patriot way. It's the Vrabel way. There are things that overlap. There are things that are similar. And I don't really think Tom Brady is bringing necessarily the Patriot way here. He went over to Tampa Bay and worked with Bruce Arians, who is completely different than how Bill Belichick does things. And Tom Brady went and won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. So I do think Tom Brady has exposure, obviously, to Belichick, but exposure to Bruce Arians and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how they do things. So I'm not as worried about bringing in the Patriot way and New England West and all of this crap. I think that was more worrisome when Josh McDaniels was here with Ziegler. That was worrisome. I don't think we're really getting that. I think with Tom Brady, what Mark Davis has done, he's hired a really good consultant. You know, if you were investing in the stock market and you had an opportunity to have a chit chat with Warren Buffett, are you answering the call? Are you going to sit down and talk to Warren Buffett? I know I am. Mark Cuban, a businessman. If you're starting a business and you need advice and you're shopping your business to get investors and you need insider information, are you going to sit down and have an opportunity to talk about business with Mark Cuban? I would. Why? Because they know something about making money. Politics and personal beliefs aside, this is a business, and you have to be able to work with your consultants, your peers, about putting your business in the best position to succeed. So I don't really care that Tom Brady is a Patriot. Again, it hurts what happened in the Tut game and what the Patriots go on and do. But that was 20 years ago. My life has moved on. I have moved on personally. And of course, I am one of those fans that I see the play and what could have been and how great it would have been to win that Super Bowl. How great it would have been to beat Tampa Bay and John Gruden with Bill Callahan. That would have been a great opportunity too. But it is what it is. I live in reality. We have to move on. I also think what's really great about having Tom Brady as part owner is if you're a young coach like Ben Johnson or offensive coordinator like Todd Monken with the Baltimore Ravens, you get an opportunity to work with Tom Brady and discuss, review film, have very complex, intricate discussions from the lens of the quarterback. The quarterback is executing the offense, and you have an opportunity to have those conversations with the GOAT. And let's be honest, Tom Brady is the GOAT, whether you like it or not. He has the most Super Bowls as the quarterback, and that's just a fact. With all respect to Joe Montana and other quarterbacks, Tom Brady's the GOAT. I mean, look at what he did to the Atlanta Falcons. Remember, that game was over, and Tom Brady executes, one of the greatest comebacks of all time. And I also ask myself this, guys: how would I feel with Tom Brady owning the Raiders that if in the next 5 years, next 10 years, the Raiders win a Super Bowl, I feel pretty damn good. Time heals all wounds. Again, I understand a lot of Raider fans are upset about Tom Brady and the New England connection, the Patriot way, all of that. I understand and I feel that too, to a degree. Again, we got to move on. But if the Raiders won a Super Bowl in the next 5 years and Tom Brady is, I'll say, an architect of this, bringing in a coach, bringing in a GM, and allowing those guys to grow into their roles, build the roster, build a competitive team, and then win a Super Bowl, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit it was Tom Brady. I'm going to be thankful that Tom Brady got the Raiders back on the winning track and delivered a Super Bowl. I've never seen a Raiders Super Bowl win in my lifetime. I don't remember seeing a win. When they lost the Super Bowl, I was 18 years old. So for 20 plus years, I have not seen this team truly be competitive. So to win a Super Bowl would heal a lot of wounds for me. With all of that said, guys, I truly believe the Raiders are going to have something extremely big to announce. My gut feeling is telling me that they're going to go with someone young. I think they're going to go with someone young and fresh, someone that's going to be dynamic with the offense, going to be able to draft, develop a quarterback and make it work. And I think it's going to be someone young like Ben Johnson. I really believe you got to look at it from the lens of developing a quarterback. I think if you're a great offensive coordinator, you're going to surround yourself with like-minded coaches that you can develop offenses, but that head coach's main responsibility is bringing up a quarterback. And I think the Raiders will do that next head coach a good service by bringing in a defensive coordinator. I know Robert Saleh is coming in next week to interview for the head coaching job. I think that's a bunch of recon to see, hey, if we were able to hire Ben Johnson or even a Pete Carroll, would you come in as a defensive coordinator? I think that's really a recon mission. I'm not saying it's going to be Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator, but I think they're gauging his interest if he would take the job. And I think for a defensive coordinator like Robert Saleh, who is a hell of a coach, I think he should have. I think the Jets made a mistake by firing him. I think he's actually a really good coach. I think this would be a good opportunity for Robert Saleh because hypothetically, if you do hire Pete Carroll, who Robert Saleh has connections with, or Ben Johnson, or another high-profile offensive-minded head coach, that if you're Robert Saleh, if you could take this defense, has a pretty good, the Raiders have a pretty decent defense, and get that improved and be consistent, get them into the playoffs 2 years in a row, and you're the defensive coordinator, I think that puts you back on top to being a head coach. And I know he has an opportunity to go to the 49ers, where the 49ers have been fairly, pretty consistent in Super Bowl contenders. This year was a dud, and you have familiarity with them and Kyle Shanahan and all that. So I understand that that's an opportunity too. I believe he interviewed with the 49ers. And, Robert Saleh could get hired at any time because he's not under contract with anybody. But I think the Raiders, if they hire someone, they're going to put a quality defensive coordinator on that side of the ball. And I think it's for Robert Saleh or any defensive coordinator, it's going to be really helpful that they're able to look at an offense and study an offense that can execute well, that can move the ball down the field and make Robert Saleh a better head coach. Because that was his problem, right? Was they took a young quarterback and they couldn't develop him. They tried putting all their eggs in the basket of Aaron Rodgers, and it just didn't work. Injuries, age, whatever. It just didn't work. So I think for a coordinator like Robert Saleh, it could be a good opportunity for him to rebuild his brand and then get that next head coaching job. I think if you hire somebody like Ben Johnson, what you're hoping for is you're finding that next stud head coach like Sean McVay, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton. Those are all coaches who are in the division, but they're all A++ head coaches. They have some pelts on the wall. They have success. They all have Super Bowl trophies. They have the hardware, man, and I think that's what the Raiders are looking for. If they don't go with the young head coach, I said it before, I don't think it's Bill Belichick. I think it would be someone like Pete Carroll, but I don't think it's going to be Pete Carroll. He's 72 years old. He has a lot of energy. We know, it's often said he has more energy than guys half his age. And I really like Pete Carroll. It's definitely a name to keep an eye on, but I don't think that's going to be the head coach. I really think the head coach is, when it's all said and done, I think it's going to be Ben Johnson, guys, as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. If I had to bet right now, the Raiders have cleared house to best align with Ben Johnson. I think they want the number one coaching candidate. They want the most dynamic offensive mind out there that's open for a position right now, that's ready to be a head coach. I think that's what they want. They want a big fish. They want to have their front office aligned with ownership, with the coach. Ben Johnson is going to be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I really believe that. And I know people are going to say, well, the Raiders don't even have a quarterback. However, they have a ton of cap room, so you can sign a veteran quarterback. You have Aiden O'Connell, who is extremely accurate quarterback. And I'm not saying this guy is a Super Bowl winning quarterback or going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I'm not claiming that. But remember, the Rams, and I know Jared Goff is a top number one pick to the Rams, but he was a cast off. And Sean McVay, who is a hell of a head coach too, said, this guy is broken. I can't win with him. And I know he goes on and wins one with Matthew Stafford. They win a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. Great. But Jared Goff has rebuilt his whole brand, rebuilt his whole career with the Lions, and they're on the path of winning a Super Bowl. If you're the Raiders, you're just trying to get to competitiveness. Wouldn't you take the production of Jared Goff and just being in the playoffs, just having a shot? I think Aiden O'Connell is accurate enough to execute an offense, and I think he could be a bridge quarterback. Like I said, you also have the opportunity to bring in a quarterback via free agency. You have the number 6 overall pick. Maybe you can trade that and get another quarterback. There are options, is what I'm getting at. There are options. There's options to get the quarterback, and there are options in the draft to building your roster. This franchise is not going to be rebuilt in a day. It's not going to be rebuilt in one offseason. It's no matter who the head coach and general manager is, it's going to take multiple off seasons, multiple drafts to get this thing back on track. And with the number 6 overall pick, I don't think you're necessarily going to be able to get a top tier quarterback, but I don't really think this is a draft class where you're getting a top tier quarterback. I'm not really sold on Sanders or Ward. Gun to my head, I'm going to take Cam Ward. I think he's a better quarterback right now. When it's all said and done, yeah, Shedeur Sanders has the athletic ability, has the pedigree, has the DNA with his father and all this stuff. But I don't really think any of these quarterbacks are all that great, to be honest. Even if you had the number 1 pick, I'm not really sold on either one of these quarterbacks. So at number 6, I think you can kind of take best player available, and there's going to be a really good player there at number 6. And like I said, it's going to take time to build this roster. So you're not going to get it all in one draft. It'd be great to do what the Washington Commanders and the Houston Texans did, where one draft, one off season, you're back in the playoffs. That would be great, but that is extremely unlikely. I think in the later rounds, you got a guy like Jackson Dart, maybe in the 2nd round. He's a bit of a mystery. He got better as the season went on. He was a highly recruited high school player into college. He played with Lane Kiffin. So I think that's a name that you can keep an eye on. I don't know that much about him other than, what I've seen a few games here and there on college football. My overall point is that the Raiders roster, there is some talent here. the next head coach and general manager is going to have options to build this stadium, to build this roster, excuse me. Like I said, you still have one of the best stadiums in the league. You have the best training facilities in the league. The franchise is flush with cash. If you're a young head coach like Ben Johnson, you're looking, it would be great to have the quarterback, but you also have an ownership that is going to give you the opportunity to grow, is going to give you the general manager that you're aligned with, is going to allow the head coach and the general manager to work together to go shop for the groceries and make the meals. And on top of that, you have one of the better situations with the salary cap. You have some talent on the roster that is still relatively young. You still have Max Crosby. You have Brock Bowers. You have a really good wide receiver room. You have some spots on the offensive line that's good. And you still have Christian Wilkins on the roster. I know he got hurt this year, but he's still available. He's still on the roster at this moment. So you have pieces on this roster to potentially be a 500 club or better. Again, I'm not expecting a Super Bowl next year, but there are some bright spots here for a coach like Ben Johnson, who maybe you don't have the quarterback, but we can get there. We can find him. And I think with somebody like Aiden O'Connell or another young quarterback, this coach would develop them. So with that, guys, I'm extremely excited. You know, my prediction is that the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders is going to be Ben Johnson. That's what I believe. I think this will probably start coming about next week. He interviewed Friday via Zoom, and I think we're going to hear more of this. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know your predictions. Let me know if I'm crazy. Would love to have more engagement with you guys and more Raider reactions on this channel. That's it, Raider Nation. Thank you so much. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and staying to the end. Cheers.